I never really cried much before. I cry freely now, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's therapeutic for me. Uh, I still love to talk about Jaxon. I'm here today. I want to talk about Jaxon. I love talking about him and what a regular kid he was. Um, but it's been a journey, and I'm realizing more and more I'm still in it. I'll never be over it. I think anybody that's ever lost a child would agree with that. You're never over it. Um, the way I explain it to people is there's a hole. There's a hole in my soul. And all I've done is build up some muscle around that hole so it just doesn't quite hurt as much. And so I build up some strength. I lean on people when I need to lean on people. Um, but there's still days when I'm driving to work and a sad song comes on and I just cry.
That was Chris Joseph, a 500-game NHLer and a former teammate of mine with the Mannheim Hadler in Germany for 3 seasons. And Chris is also the father of Jaxon Joseph. And Jaxon was one of the players on the Humbolt Broncos bus traveling north for a playoff game on April 6, 2018 who perished. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am Jason Podolin, your host, and today we are speaking with Chris Joseph. Chris was a teammate of mine in Mannheim with the Adler. That was the first time I'd ever met Chris, and we ended up playing together for 3 years over there. Chris had come off 500 games in the NHL, and he was a highly touted player coming into the NHL. He was a 5th overall draft pick in 1987. To the Pittsburgh Penguins. And we talk about it in the episode, but that was 10 spots higher than Hall of Famer Joe Sakic. So at the time, Joe was a big player in the junior ranks. And because of that status, he ended up playing on 2 World Junior teams, which we also cover. The first one was in the Czech Republic when the lights got turned out in the brawl against Russia. So we covered that. I had no idea he was a part of that game, so that was really shocking to me during this interview to know that he was a part of that game. And he went on. He got traded young. He got traded to Edmonton. He ended up playing with both Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. I got to play with Mario twice on 2 different occasions, and got to play with Wayne as a 19-year-old. Not many people have the luxury of saying they were in dressing rooms with both of those 2 icons. But we talk about that. But more importantly, and maybe most importantly, is we talk about Chris Joseph, the father. And Chris Joseph, the father of the recently passed Jaxon Joseph. Jaxon was on that bus crash, the Humbolt Broncos bus crash 3 years ago. And we had this interview the day after the anniversary of the crash on Green Shirt Day. And Chris, or Joe as I call him, he was an unbelievable teammate, and he was somebody that I kept in contact with after I retired, and I'd seen him since we played. And that's not the case with everyone I played with. You play with a lot of players, and some guys you keep in contact with, and some guys you don't. And Chris was somebody that I did. When I heard of that crash, and when I found out that Jaxon was on that bus, Jaxon, the same Jaxon that was running around the dressing room in Mannheim, and I got to watch him grow up over 3 years. It was obviously hard. I mean, it was hard for me. It was hard for the hockey world, and obviously it was incredibly hard for anyone that was a part of that Humboldt Broncos team and had a first person connection to that tragedy. And Chris, was directly connected with his oldest son being on that bus and unfortunately not making it. So we spoke about the crash, and Joe did an amazing job of his poise and his authenticity and his transparency with where he's at, and his willingness to speak about where he's at and where the family's at, and his willingness to talk about Jaxon and what type of a player and what type of a person he was. And he made it really easy for me with really tough questions. I mean, I wanted to give Chris the space to go where he wanted with that. Going into this interview is one of the most nervous that I've been, because I knew how many times I've cried over that scenario, and having Chris in front of me and talking to him about something that is, so here I go again, but just so emotional. I didn't know where it was going to go, but and I knew too going in that Chris said that this anniversary was an incredibly hard one, and obviously it's never going to change, but completely that is. Joe speaks in the interview about he's never going to be the same Chris Joseph again, and yeah. So long story short, we talk about the bus crash. We talk about Caleb, one of the survivors of the crash, in the book, and that he just wrote, called Crossroads. And anyways, Joe was an all-star as always. He showed who he is and why he was such a valuable teammate to so many teams that he played on. He handled a really difficult situation, with class and with pride and with respect for his family and for his son. And he was always somebody I looked up to, Chris, and still do, but even as I was playing in Mannheim, and he had this great wife and this awesome family, and Chris's disposition, and what pride he took in being a father, and how he represented himself with his family, was something that I always looked up to. And he was a bit of a mentor for me in that way, without him probably even knowing it. And again, like I said in this interview, and in interviews past that I've seen him on, he did a great job with tough subject matter. So Chris, if you're listening to this, thank you for being so awesome. Thank you for being so willing to chat about such tough subjects, and also sharing your career and your story, and what hockey means to you. And I think a lot of us can relate to the togetherness and the interconnectedness of this great sport. And even though this tragedy, there's no other word for it. This tragedy was something that was so awful, that there is some good that's coming from it. The book from Caleb is inspiring a lot of people. Green Shirt Day is saving lives with the organ donation, and there is some beams of hope and an inspiration that are coming from that crash. And I know personally I'll always remember that day, and my sticks will be out, and my thoughts will be with those players and those families. And yeah, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with my ex-teammate and good friend, Mr. Chris Joseph. All right, partner. I think we're rocking here. Live on Facebook in the parent group, and I think I'm on my normal channel as well for episode 59 here of the Up My Hockey podcast, with an awesome friendly face, a guy that was my teammate for 3 years for the Adler Mannheim over in Germany, and that's Mr. Chris Joseph. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks, Jason. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. I know we just had a chance to briefly catch up here, couple minutes before we went live. Always nice to see you. One of my fondest memories is actually after we were playing, is when I got to go back and visit you at the old fire hall there, and I brought my youngest, or my oldest now, and you got him behind the wheel. And anyways, that was super fun memories for me that day, and kind of encapsulates for me what I really remembered. He was a teammate in Germany too. Are you doing? What are you doing? Are you still doing firefighting? Is that what your job is?
Yeah, I just started my 15th year with the Edmonton Fire Department, and it's good. For a hockey player, it's a really good transition. It's very similar, so I've really enjoyed that. And of course, with COVID and everything lately, everything's been locked down, and so I still have to go to work because we can't do that remotely. And
Hmm.
so it's actually given me a lot of sanity, which has been awesome. And of course, I love my crew. It's they're teammates, right?
Yeah.
I've enjoyed that, and other than that, just been kind of trying to get by, man. I think we all just walk the dogs every day and do that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. Just a quick sort of transitional question there with the firefighting. What is it about that that you think is conducive for a hockey player, and why it's such a great fitting job to be a firefighter and to do it well?
Well, the biggest thing is how to be a team player. We so naturally when we all finished playing hockey, we were really good at one thing. We were good at hockey, and I personally didn't have a lot of life skills in anything else. But what I did find is that you're a good student, you're a hard worker, you can learn anything. So I learned how to, fight fires. I learned how to do medical aid stuff, and you can learn that stuff. But the biggest thing that we had as intangible was that we knew how to be a team player. We knew when it was, go time and to work and be serious and dig. And then we knew when it was time to goof off and be a fun teammate. And that part is the same in the fire hall. Like we get a lot of downtime too. But when it's go time, you put your game face on and you go. The other aspect is we like to stay fit, right? And it was the same when we played hockey. We are
Yeah.
working out and staying active, and so we have to do that as well. So it's a good mesh. Um, I do tease the firefighters. They're like, "Is it? It must be exactly the same as hockey." And I say, "Well, a lot of similarities, but I got some nice job security with the Edmonton Fire Department. I had zero job security in hockey, as there's a few guys every day trying to take your job, but
Yeah.
it's a wonderful, wonderful transition for any kind of a hockey player or any athlete, really.
Yeah, hockey's a great sport for that, for sure. The camaraderie, in the locker room, what you're willing to do for each other, and what you have to do for each other, really, in your job. I mean, you have to depend on each other and be trustworthy, or else shit can go wrong in a hurry, I'm sure. So, a lot of parallels. Um, Today is Green Shirt Day, um, which is symbolic of which came into existence because of the tragedy of 2018, which was yesterday. Uh, might as well just kind of jump into that. I mean, what is Green Shirt Day to you? Is that a piece of your process now when this anniversary comes, or what does that mean to you and your family?
It is, and I'm not wearing my green shirt, but I am wearing my Humboldt shirt, which has got some green on it. But in the beginning, so in the right after the crash, it was terrible, right? It was everything was bad. But a good thing that we found that came out of it right away was Logan Boulet had he hadn't signed, but he had made his wishes known that he wanted to be an organ donor. He was, they said he was brain dead at the hospital, but his organs were still viable. And they were able to use his organs. He passed away the next day, but they used his organs to help 6 people. And I'm sure most people remember, but what it did was it created this Logan Boulet effect where organ donorship went crazy and people started signing their cards, and it went crazy in a good way. So the organ donorship, the Logan Boulet effect, the Green Shirt Day is one of the nicest things that's come out of our tragedy, and we have to support it because it's a good thing. But we support it because it was Logan's, and I think it's awesome. I've always had my donor card signed. I'm getting to the age where nobody wants my organ. They're old, but I think it's a thing, and today's a tough day for the Boulet family, but they've somehow found a way to turn it into a beautiful thing.
Yeah, isn't that that's kind of the challenge, right? Of finding something, finding a silver lining or something beautiful and something that, was so ugly in so many ways. And obviously saving the lives of six others or helping the lives of six others, with that is a great legacy for Logan. Do my father-in-law comes to mind because he's sitting there waiting for a kidney right now. He's at 8% function, and it's just not. COVID has put a lot of wrinkle in a lot of transplants that aren't considered like life threatening at the moment. And geez, to find donors, it's a hard thing. I mean, it's a big sacrifice. I get it on the donor end, but uh, there is people that need them for sure. And it's awesome to see that Logan had that effect on everybody. What does you know for me, and that's the thing, obviously I'm here on my channel with my platform and people who enjoy following me, so I share sometimes my thoughts and feelings about stuff. And um the crash in Humboldt was and is, I mean, something that it's just one of those things that hits me. And it hit me even harder when I knew it was you. I knew it was you and your family. um I have a little process kind of that I do here, and as with the pub in Fort McMurray, there was something that we tried to do. What I mean, being so in it and being right next to it, like you're there every day, obviously. Like, is there a process or something your family has done to commemorate this in a positive way, where you found that silver lining to commemorate Jaxon and what an amazing kid he was?
Well, we've learned a lot over the last 3 years, and we've grown. Um, what I've realized is that I'm not the same person. So I'm not the old Chris. I'm a different Chris. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, which I try to tell people. Like, I'm definitely more sensitive now, but on the flip side, I've also got a little bit shorter fuse. So the emotions are a little bit higher. So, but I'm never going to be that guy again. My wife's never going to be that girl again. My kids are never going to be those same kids. So, we're always changing, but that was definitely a defining moment in our lives. Um, and, like, I never really cried much before. I cry freely now, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's therapeutic for me. Uh, I still love to talk about Jaxon. I'm here today. I want to talk about Jaxon. I love talking about him and, what a regular kid he was. Um, but it's been a journey. And I'm realizing more and more I'm still in it. I'll never be over it. I think anybody that's ever lost a child would agree with that. You're never over it. Um, the way I explain it to people is there's a hole. There's a hole in my soul. And all I've done is build up some muscle around that hole, so it just doesn't quite hurt as much. And so I build up some strength. I lean on people when I need to lean on people. Um, but there's still days when I'm driving to work and a sad song comes on and I just cry. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting pretty good at crying and then picking up 10 minutes later and getting back to it. Um, so it's been a journey. And we've noticed too that, there's four of us in the family now. There's myself, my wife, my son, and my daughter, and we're all on our journeys. And what we've all just tried to do is just appreciate that one day I might be sad, Andy might be having a good day, Brett might be indifferent, and Taylor might be frustrated. And it's okay. It's okay that we're in different places. And so we just have to respect that we're in different places one day, could all be switched the next day. But we just keep loving each other and supporting each other and getting through it and moving forward.
Yeah, what a great metaphor that was, to explain how you're feeling. And I could totally understand that too, because I'm sure a day when you're grieving or you're sad, and at the start, maybe if, like you said, if Andy was maybe having an okay day, like you could almost be judgmental about that, and then that would be divisive, and that's the last thing you want. And everyone grieves differently, and everyone goes through stuff differently. So to allow that, I guess, as being a learning lesson is probably something that's really helped. I watched your interview with CTV, which I think it was 3 days after the crash, maybe, or something. And I remember at the time, which, by the way, I don't know what you thought or if you've ever watched the coverage there, but like, I'm never impressed with the news at all, almost zero of the time.
Yeah.
I thought TSN did and CTV did really good jobs with that. And your interview, man, like, I couldn't imagine you more authentic, more raw, more honest, and seeing you talk about Jaxon in such a proud father way, but like in a real way that was, I don't know. That just still moves me to this day. And I just wanted to say how proud I was of you for doing that. And I think I texted you and told you at the time, how hard that would have been. I can just imagine. But there is still, there's definitely a big shining light in that interview about how proud you were of that boy that was becoming a man. And maybe, tell us a little bit about Jaxon and, what type of player he was, what type of person he was.
Well, and, like that interview, I do try to tell everybody that Jaxon was a regular kid. He was not perfect. He had his flaws. But like all of our kids, you appreciate their highlights, their lowlights, and they are who they are. And they're just trying to do their best to figure life out. And he was no different. He was a classic middle child. He was really flexible within the family. He could, Taylor would say, let's go to Dairy Queen. And he'd be like, okay, sure, let's go to Dairy Queen. And then mom would say, I want to take the dogs for a walk. And he'd be like, okay, sure. And he was just that middle child that was flexible. He was a goofball. He liked, if he was in trouble, he would try to make you laugh and get up. There would be times when Andy would yell at him. Mom's yelling at him. And he would just start doing this. So I'm like, Mom, come on. Like, I'm number one, right? And Mom's mad, right? Cute face. And he's number one. And then you can see Mom start to crack. And she starts to, she was putty in his hands. And she's the same way with Brett and Taylor as well. But so he was a charmer. And I always like to say that he was one of those guys that you would go hang with that made you feel good about you. And he was he'd build you up. Loved his teammates, loved to just go hang out, play hockey. And, I think he was a regular kid. And I think that's kind of what made him special.
Yeah,
regular
that's
kid.
Awesome. How was he? What would his teammates say about him? How would they describe him?
I think he liked to, and he wasn't really this way at home as much, but I think he liked to be the life of the party in the room. Oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. But I think he liked to be, he liked to have the attention on him, which is, weird. But yeah, but he was that way in the room too. He would get along with everybody, but they had a pretty unique group, so they all got along pretty good.
Is that maybe a chip off the old block? That would be potentially how a lot of your teammates might describe you as well. Do you see that, you and him?
There were some similarities for sure. Yeah, I love being in the room too, and it's a happy place. It's supposed to be a safe place, and that's what made me happy. That's probably what made you happy. That's what made him happy. So yeah, I guess, like it or not, he's part of me, and he probably had some of my good qualities. My bad.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, you weren't so much the life of the party guy as far as spotlight was concerned, but you were definitely, I know, you would talk to anyone like they were your best friend, a German or Canadian or otherwise, whether you played with them before, whether he was 15 years younger than you or, 5 years older. So I think you always gave everyone their space, and there's value to that. And I've heard you describe, Jaxon as a glue guy before too. And that's kind of, when you use those words, I obviously only knew Jaxon walking around in the dressing room as a young boy, and watching him grow up a little bit. But I thought of you, and I'm like, geez, that might be the way I would describe Chris. Like you were like that. You were just a guy that was easy to be around, and I think that not most people would leave the conversation smiling with you, on the team, yeah. and would lift guys up. So that's that is cool that Jaxon was able to take some of that from his old man and carry it with him on his journey. And I'm hopefully, if I have a few good qualities, that my boys are doing the same thing. We had a little bit of issues today with brothers, as you might imagine, and being close in age. And there's been some sibling rivalry going on that Dad kind of cracked a little bit today. And when I was then I kind of went to this interview and I'm like, what am I getting so pissed off about? Like, just chill, just relax, be grateful. This is it's a good thing to have these problems. So yeah, I mean, I love hearing you talk about Jaxon. Is there anything these young hockey players? I know, I mean, right now there's probably some parents listening, and I know there's some players definitely listening to the podcast. Is there one thing that would have gotten Jaxon to the level that he was at and would have maybe allowed him to continue on, that would have been an intangible? It's maybe not how hard he shot, or maybe not what a great skater he was, but something that would have placed him on a team and made him a desirable teammate or player for somebody.
The thing that I think about all the time is that the rink was his happy place. And he played midget double. He played bantam double. Like, he wasn't a AAA kid, but he just loved going to the rink. And basically because he loved going to the rink, he loved being there, and it was his happy place. And he wasn't afraid to work hard. He just kept getting better. And good enough to play junior B and good enough to play junior A. And, he was just the type of kid that just kept working. And I really believe it's because of the love of the game. So when I was coaching and you're coaching now, I mean, we all love that kid that comes to the rink with a big smile on his face. Nobody likes the kid that comes to the rink with an attitude. Nobody likes the kid that comes to the rink and doesn't put in an effort in practice, but the kid that, works hard, smiles, gets along with everybody, we all kind of want to nurture that kid and see what he can do, because I truly believe that that's what kept him going. And, I like watching kids like that because they're easy to coach, for one. And they do generally make your team better, even if they can't turn left as good as the other kid, or they don't shoot the puck as hard, but they'll work hard. They're coachable. I think that's why Jaxon just kept going. He just never a superstar, but he just kept working at it.
Yeah. And you know what else happens is they get better. Yeah. Those kids get better, yeah, there's a kid that comes to mind. I won't name names, but at the start of the year, and I was working with the top Atom team in Vernon, I was just, obviously no judgment, but you see kids and you kind of place them, in your head. And I was just like, he wasn't a natural talent. It didn't speak out to me, but he loved the game, studied the game, worked his tail off in practice. I'm talking 1 year at an 8-9-year-old level, right? But this kid closed so many gaps, right? Yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes we fall in love with talent, right? But I'm really starting to fall in love with those intangibles that you're talking about, right? Those intangibles close a lot of gaps and open a lot of doors. And if you show up at the rink with the right attitude, like you're saying, and you have that love of the game and, be a good person, geez, your coach, like you just said, he wants to go to bat for you. He wants you to succeed in a genuine, authentic way. Right. And boy, I mean, you and I in our pro careers, how many times did we have somebody that you really felt was in your corner? And when you did, you really knew it, right? That makes a big difference for a player. So I could see that. I mean, there's a couple of kids I'm working with right now that are getting that opportunity. And I love being able to pick up the phone and say, you know what, this kid's going to be a star in your locker room. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
He's going to make your team better. He's going to make your organization better. He's going to make the community better. And he's going to help you on the ice too, by the way. But, those are the guys you want to build around. You mentioned that team being special, meaning Humboldt. Did you have a feeling for that before this whole thing went down? And what about it was special at that point?
So, I mean, you and I played on lots of teams. Jaxon had played on, 3 or 4 junior teams. And when he got to Humboldt, he was there for about 2 weeks. And of course, we were chatting every day. And he goes, Dad, this team's awesome. He goes, there's no cliques. Everybody gets along. And I remember him saying that it was the closest team he'd ever been on. And I thought back to all of my experiences, and I've been on some really nice close teams. I've been on some average teams. I've been on some teams with some dysfunction. And I said to him, I go, well, enjoy it, Jax, because it's kind of rare, and it doesn't happen very often. So when it does, I go, it's pretty awesome. And that was my first inclination that the team was special. And then after all the tragedy, I met all the families, and just like good people, they were just like you and I. They just wanted the best for their kids. There was no egos. There was no prima donnas. And I'm like, well, okay, so we got good families. That's why all the kids were good. And the biggest factor, which we haven't even touched on yet, was the coach, Darcy Hogan. He created an environment in the room that bred that togetherness and that cohesiveness. He was huge. And he would seek out character over talent. I mean, it'd be nice if he had both, obviously, but he was that guy that put that team together. So were they special? Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say now that they're gone. But I remember even like it was November 1st, 2017, Jaxon said they're special. And I'm like, enjoy it. And, like I talked to the survivors still. I stay in touch with a few of them. And they're still just as awesome today as they were to Jaxon back then. They're like our kids. So good quality people. That's really all I say. And they were led by a good quality person. I think that speaks a lot to, what you want on a team. And I know myself, when I'm coaching a team, I want character. I mean, it's nice to have speed and skill and talent, but it's so much easier to work with character players.
One of those character players, at least, I haven't had an opportunity to speak with him yet personally, but it looks like I talked with his publicist and he's going to come on the podcast, and that's Caleb Dahlgren, who wrote that book, Crossroads, and one of the survivors. And I've heard him on a couple interviews, and I mean, he at this point, he sounds almost extraordinary, like how, just how positive he is and how he was able to turn some things and find new perspective, right? And be able to provide, hope to a lot of people. And it's just like, he seems so inspiring. It almost seems superhuman. Do you know Caleb at all? Have you had a chance to read the book and what that means to you?
So I know Caleb a little bit. And we've gotten to know him a lot more since the crash, obviously. I have read the book. And when you read the book and you read about Caleb, you're all like, there's nobody this good. Nobody's this nice and giving. And you want to think it's an act, but it isn't. The guy is like, he's legit. Like, he really, truly cares about everybody else. And you're just like, why? And he really is that way. His parents did a wonderful job with him. So we knew the book was coming out, and Caleb has been upfront and honest with us, because we've actually had other people try to write books before, and it was, there's some hurt feelings and stuff as to, you don't know. But so Caleb was the first one of our group that decided to write a book, and he's like, I'm doing this. This is part of my journey. I'm only going to tell my story. And he was really open and honest with us all. And I think I can speak unanimously for the whole group, is that we wish him well. We're like, yeah, do it, Caleb. Like, this is yours. Nobody would say, it's too soon, don't write a book. We're rooting for him because he's a good kid. So I read the book, and I kind of broke it into 3 parts. The first part was about him growing up with his diabetes and stuff. And, I found that interesting. The second part, he talked a lot about the crash, and he doesn't have a lot of memory. So a lot of it was what people were telling him. I found that part quite difficult, just because there was, a lot of real raw emotion there. And then there was a really nice message at the end. So again, we wish Caleb the best. He's a solid kid. He does seem too good to be true, but he is who he is. It's not an act.
That's awesome. I'm glad you can provide that, because the way you said it is kind of how I was thinking, because not having a chance to speak with him, right? Like I said, I've heard him on 2 interviews, and it almost sounded like, holy smokes, like this guy's almost too much. But like, that's awesome that you're validating that this is coming from a true and authentic place, and you endorsing it. And I think that's great, because that was sort of why I didn't know what answer you're going to get. You know what I mean? I when I was going to ask you that, because there obviously is a lot of emotion in what's going on. And who knows what he wrote about. I mean, I haven't read the book yet. His publicist is going to send me one, so I'm going to read it, so I can't speak to it. But I obviously knew that he was going to talk about the crash and his relation to it and everything else. And there can be some judgy things that maybe go on for some people, right? So I didn't know how that worked, but I'm glad that he reached out too and was sensitive to that, and and wanted everyone to agree.
I do have to tell you something's funny about him. So it's not funny, but we went to visit him in the hospital, and for as nice as he is and polite as he is, when he had his brain injury, he actually lost that part of his the sympathetic part, the polite part. And so we're going to go see him, and his dad, Mark, is outside of the hospital room. And he goes, just to forewarn you, he's a bit of an ornery bitch right now. And we're like, oh, okay. And we didn't even know Caleb at that time. He was just kind of cold. And we're like, he's like, how's Joey doing? And he didn't know, right? And so I had to tell him he didn't make it. And he just kind of looks at me, just stone face. He's like, oh, too bad. And I'm like, I'm just shocked. But he started to get that part of his brain back with the regular Caleb. And since then, he's over the top. But it was weird when in the beginning, he lost that part.
Isn't that wild? Wow.
Thought he was never going to get it back. And apparently the stuff that he was saying to the nurses, swearing at the nurses, and he would never do that. And, I can do it myself. And he's swearing, and he was a different person.
Right.
So it's nice to see him back.
Right. Wow.
He really is.
The neurology behind that's kind of wild too. Like I never, that your emotions and how you are in that way is like tied to something in your brain is wild. That organization continues on. They try to move forward. COVID's been so weird. How has hockey for you? It's almost been different from that day, kind of. I mean, it was like that first year, I guess, was sort of a normal year, and then it was, then we have COVID and this and that. Like, what role does hockey play for you guys now and your family?
Well, I think we're one of the lucky ones that we still have a love of the game. We still have a passion for the game. My youngest, Brett, is still playing junior. He's out there in Kelowna. But I questioned that too. There are some families that have a hard time watching hockey. I questioned it. I said to my youngest, I said, Brett, you don't have to be a hockey player. It's okay if you don't want to play ever again. I'm totally cool with it. And he's like, no, Dad, I want to keep playing. And he went through a couple of years in midget, and he struggled with losing his brother and everything. But we found, and this is just the Joseph family, hockey has helped for us. And we're back, and we love the game. It doesn't change anything for us. Now, I know there are a couple families that are struggling with the game, and they don't love it as much as they used to. I know there's some survivors that don't love the game as much as they used to. And we say that's okay too. But I know for me, we live here in Edmonton. I still get excited to watch the Oilers. I still get excited to step on the ice, do an alumni event. I still get excited to go watch my son play. We've been lucky that we've maintained our love of the game. And I think it's actually helped. It's helped us a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty wild that you go there like that. I mean, I can see that too, right? I mean, a game that's obviously given you so much for so long, right? Like the life that your family knew and the places that you've been, and then also that same game essentially, took away that piece, right? So I could see how families could have that disassociation with it.
I gotta say too, there have been moments. We're sort of lucky in that there's not a lot of guilt associated with our family. We have a villain that we can blame for losing our son. But there were moments when I'm like, well, I'm a hockey player. I made my kids hockey players. Should I have done that? Is it fair that I pushed them into hockey? And I want to say that I introduced them to the game and they fell in love with it themselves. I never pushed. I was never that guy. But you always wondered that, like, is hockey still going to be the same? And like I said, we're lucky. We still love the game.
I'll ask you before I was going to get into your career, but I want to just touch briefly on you being a coach, and I assume you coached either both your boys or one of them. Yeah. How was that for you as far as like being able to coach and then yet also coach your son? So you have the dad hat and the coach hat, and how did that work for you guys?
Well, coaching in general for me was awesome. I loved it. I'm that type of guy that steps on the ice and I got a smile on my face. And, I love that time with just the team, without parents. It's funny, like we love parents, but oh God, they're a lot of work.
Yeah.
But coaching your kids is a different dynamic as well. And Jaxon and I had to learn it together. Brett and I had to learn it together. We had to learn where our boundaries were as we went through. And we all had to mature. I had to mature as a coach. The kids had to mature as players and find that acceptance of, he's being dad right now. He's being a coach right now. And it's so hard to not show like he's your favorite. And then it's also so hard to not show that you're kind of sitting him on the bench just to show that he's not your favorite. And so it's a difficult dynamic for the dad, the coach, but it's also a tough spot for the kid too. Like I do think that, both my sons would have looked back on the times together and thought that was awesome father-son time. But it can also be a little bit difficult. So it's a dance. It's a dance you and your son got to do together, or you and your daughter got to do together, and just kind of figure it out. And as long as you've got the best interests of the team in mind, you should be fine as a coach, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah. Did you ever swing, like, was your pendulum either on one side or the other, being, if you were to be honest as you can, like, was it more favoritism or more of the opposite, more like they got the harder treatment than anyone else?
I would probably say they got a little bit harder. Like if someone had to serve a penalty, that was probably if, end of the game, I'm probably not putting my kid out there just because of the optics. So I think they got it harder that way as a player.
Yeah.
But as far as, talking to your kids on the drive home after the game, I remember both Jaxon and Brett, they said to me, Dad, why don't you tell me how it is like Papa does, my dad? And he just tells me he played like crap. And I'm like, well, you did this good. You could work on. I was always they wanted me to be tougher. So I was never really the tough dad.
Yeah.
There was a couple of times, I think most parents get frustrated with the effort. And if the effort's not there, like son or daughter, you're doing yourself a disservice, you're doing your team a disservice, wasting my time, wasting everybody's time. But yeah, overall, I think I tried to find balance.
Yeah. It's one of my most heartbreaking moments was my first year coaching Hudson. So he was my oldest, and so he wanted me to coach, and it was he made the Adam C team by like the skin of his teeth. His first year, and so I was coaching that team, and we were whatever. I mean, we were just doing the best we could, and he mentioned the optics, so I was in that scenario where I was like, well, I'm not going to be that dad, right? Like I'm not going to give all my attention to my kid for sure. And at the time I wasn't aware, but we were coming home from practice, and it was about 2 months into the season, and Hudson says, Dad, how come you don't coach me like you coach the other players? You never talk to me on the ice, and I was like, oh my God, like, buddy, like, is that how you feel? Like, and I'm like, that's definitely not what I want you to think, So like from that moment on, I realized that I had gone too far the one way, right? Like I was expending my energy and my focus on making sure everyone else felt like they were a part of it and included and being a coach for them. Yet I was completely ostracizing and not coaching my own kid, right? Like letting him kind of sink over there by himself. So anyways, there is that balance, because you are worried about, obviously the other kids. You're worried about, the parents. You want to do the best job you can. You also want your kids to have a good environment and a good experience. Yeah, I mean, I think we the only people who are going to empathize with us are our fellow coaches, because I don't think it's not, you don't like quite get it until you're behind the bench, you're blowing the whistle.
I do remember there was times when, let's say I wanted to say, we want to enter the offensive zone wide. Let's just keep it simple like that. We don't want to interrupt the middle. So you tell the whole team, you want to enter the zone wide. You want to enter the zone wide. So, Robbie doesn't do it right. You pull him aside and say, Robbie, we're supposed to be entering the zone wide. Get it to the wings and we'll enter the zone. Then you say it to another kid and they're like, okay, coach. And then you say it to your son. He's like, why are you always picking on me? You're like, well, so it is right? Like, it's a little more emotional when it's thrown.
Yeah, for sure. I've always asked them too, and that's the thing. I do enjoy it. Like, I really do enjoy it. I love it. I think I'm good at it. You know what I mean? Like, I can say that with some pride. So I enjoy that, but it's definitely not about me. And like every year I'm like, do you guys want me to be a part of this? Like, I definitely don't have to. Don't say yes for me. Right. Like, and they do at this point. So, I mean, I'll do it as long as they want. And, at some point you're not going to be able to, obviously. So, I'll take advantage of it while we can and see where it goes. But they're all three are really passionate about it. They really enjoy it right now. And I was kind of even the other way, Joe. Like, my oldest, Hudson, like, he had to ask me multiple times to play hockey. And everyone's like so shocked when I say that, because I was like, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure that he wanted to do it. You know what I mean? And it wasn't me like putting him on skates and, getting him in power skating. And he's going to be this amazing hockey player. Like, I wanted to do it for him on his terms. And I wanted to make sure that he wanted to do it. And, and it's been in his blood. I mean, I think from day one, because we were trying to make him into a skier. And our family plans weren't in hockey rinks. And my wife was like, maybe we'll try skiing. Anyways, it just didn't work. They all were counting the minutes on the chairlift until they could get to a hockey rink or to the pond or whatever. So anyways, we're a hockey family, and we'll stick it out and see where it goes. But speaking of hockey, buddy, I don't think many people probably know that you were picked 10 picks higher than Joe Sakic in the 1987 draft, 5th overall that year. I mean, obviously, just a really impressive thing to have on your resume in the first place. Went on to play 500 NHL games, and then some. Played with some really amazing players. What was minor hockey like for you, and when did you get that bug, like that passion?
Well, I think I always had it. I was always, I was like that. I like to be at the rink. I was happy. I didn't think it was a thing. I didn't think I was going to make it anywhere. I grew up in Burnaby, and I remember looking at the Burnaby Bluehawks junior B team. And I looked up to these guys. I said, Dad, I want to play for the Burnaby Bluehawks. And my dad's a school teacher. And he's like, you're going to have to work your butt off to get there. And so I just kept working at it. Like you, like Jaxon, like as we were talking about earlier, I loved the rink. And so I just kept working at it. And I think it was Bantam. All of a sudden, the Seattle Thunderbirds noticed me. And I was at a tournament and in Kamloops. And they listed me, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And they're like, well, we want you to come to camp. And so I went to camp. I made the team. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, it was a whirlwind, right? And all I knew is I wanted to play hockey. And, you get in that 16-year-old year in the Western Hockey League, and you're just trying to get in there, and you're trying to establish yourself and become a regular. And I did that by the end of the season. And it was just because, you just keep working at it. And, if a coach would give me shit, I would, in my own head, I'd be like, yeah, I got to be better. I got to be better. I never once thought, oh, that coach doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I guess I had some internal drive, which was good. And I just kept getting better. And yeah, actually, I grew up with Joe Sakic. And we went to the draft together. I got a really good picture of him and I at the draft. The only reason I went higher than him because I was in my second year in the Western Hockey League and he was a rookie. He was in his first year. But they obviously got it right. The Quebec Nordiques when drafted him because he was pretty awesome. Like when I played him in Bantam and Midget, I was like, oh my God. Like I I think I got to take credit and say I made Joe a star.
There you go.
He got to beat the likes of me all the time, but just an awesome dude, and unreal player that deserves all the accolades that he gets. He was pretty awesome. But
seems like a heck of a hockey mind too now in his new role there in GM. But back to you though. Joe Sakic's got enough. I want to talk about Chris Joseph. You make that team out of camp, and you're surprised. Like you're genuinely, like you're telling me you didn't know it was coming, that there was a chance. So now you're in a new country at 16 years old, building for Seattle Thunderbirds, and now you're in it. You're a major junior player, and the Burnaby Blue Hawks are way in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and
that's crazy.
I don't know. I was very naive. I'm sure even as a 30-year-old when I played with you in Germany, you probably thought he was naive for an old guy. But they took me in Seattle and they were telling my dad he's going to be a first rounder, and my dad's like, yeah, whatever, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't know. I'm like, just give me a rink. I just want to play.
Yeah.
And they were true to their word in that they developed me and they worked with me. And I didn't believe that was going to be the case, but I did get into my 17-year-old year, and all of a sudden Central Scouting's got you on their radar. And then as the season went on, I climbed and climbed and climbed. And then I think I made the World Juniors that year as well. I think a lot, so I was an underage playing World Juniors. That probably moved my stats up quite a bit. So I guess that's
crazy. So as a drafted player, as a draft eligible player, you were playing major junior. Not many. Well, you must have been one, if not of a couple, if not zero other people on that team of that status.
Junior team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was me, Shanahan, Pierre Turgeon, and maybe Luke Richardson.
That's wild. That's cool. Did you guys win?
That was the year of brawl. That was the year 1987 Pia Standy. We got in the brawl.
Oh my gosh. How did I not know that? And if I knew that, how did I forget it? We got to cover that now. So you were a part of when they shut the lights off in Russia?
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to tell your audience to Google the 1987 brawl. I'm number 5. I'm right on the ice. I'm front and center. I'm probably one of the first fights. I didn't start it though. But yeah, so I was in that.
What happened? So for anyone who doesn't know what happened there, is World Juniors. It was in Russia, playing Russia. You can tell the nuances of it. All hell breaks loose, essentially. It's a bench clearing brawl at the World Junior Championships. The Russian authorities, whoever they are, don't know what to do. And I think as a means to stop it, they shut the lights off. So now it's a bench clearing brawl in the dark. If you could imagine anything more scary than a bench clearing brawl, it's doing it when you can't see what's happening. As a player, what was your memory of that? Like, what was that like on the ice?
I got tons of memories. And of course, I've told the story lots, but of course, I'll tell it again. So we were actually in Czechoslovakia, which is now Slovakia. But at the time it was Czechoslovakia. We were playing against the Russians. There was no medal round, so there was no gold medal game. It was just round robin. Everybody plays 8 games or 7 games, and best record wins. We needed to win by 5 to get the gold. We needed to win by less than 5 or tie. We got silver, and if we lost, we got a bronze. Russians had nothing. They were out of it, and so they played spoiler, and they were chippy. And they weren't a very good team that year for some reason. They weren't getting fed. There was rumors they were getting belittled and berated all the time. And so they were just a really unhappy bunch. And this was the final game of the tournament. And it just got chippy, and it got worse and worse and worse. And we actually had some refs that couldn't keep up. And so they struggled. So they missed a lot. And, Theo Fleury was on our team. He was a little bit of an agitator too. So long story short, halfway through the second, we're up 4-2. Would we have gotten 5? I don't know, but we felt confident that we were getting there. And it started off with one little fight over here, and then I got in the next fight right here, and it ended up what was a 5-on-5. And back in 1987 in the Western Hockey League, a 5-on-5 was not good, but it wasn't out of the norm.
Yeah.
we look up, and I look up. I'm fighting my guy. I look up, and both benches are coming. I'm like, uh-oh. So, yeah, from there on, like I let my guy go. I went around to where the goalies were. I went in the corner and helped another guy. And we're all, where everybody's fighting. And then they turned the lights out because they didn't know what else to do. And it got even crazier. When the lights go out and you get to that stage where you can start to make out light and dark, we were wearing white, they were wearing red, so you could kind of tell who was who. And guys were just going around suckering each other, and it was bad. So we ended up breaking ourselves up, and we stopped ourselves. They turned the lights back on. We go in the dressing room. We're hooting and hollering like it's a game. We're going to get lots of penalties, and we're going to go back out. And we're going to win this gold medal. Our manager comes in the room and says we've been disqualified and we've been kicked out of the country. And so now we got guys that are crying. We got guys that are swearing. We got guys that are just silent. We kind of came to the realization that this is real. We packed up our bags and we were leaving the dressing room. And as we left the dressing room, there was lying down the hallway all the way out to our bus, Czechoslovakian military. And each guy had a machine gun over his shoulder and a German Shepherd. And we had to walk right down the middle, straight to the bus. The Russians had the same thing. We got on the bus and we left the country. I think we went to Zurich. We slept in the airport for like 12 hours, caught a flight home, and that was the end of it. We came home disgraced, but I have to tell this part. This was my favorite part. About a month later, we got invited to go to Toronto, all of the national junior team. Harold Ballard, who owned the Leafs, he hated the Russians. So he invites us to Maple Leaf Gardens. We go, he introduces us to the crowd before the game, and we walk across the blue line one by one. We get a standing ovation in Maple Leaf Gardens, and then Harold Ballard comes out and hands us all gold medals that he made himself. Yeah, and it says the Maple Leaf Forever. So it's a pretty cool gold medal. And, a lot of us, a lot of Canadian hockey players that played World Juniors have won gold medals. I got to go back the next year, and we actually won the gold medal the next year in '88 in Moscow. So I have two. I have a gold medal, and I have the Harold Ballard one. And the Harold Ballard one is by far my favorite. It's much nicer.
That is what a wild story. So you say come home disgraced. Like, I mean, I would say at this point in hockey history, as far as being Canadian, like that team almost is revered in some aspects that it did that. Like, that wasn't the initial flavor when you got back?
Initially, there was a lot of mixed emotions, and there was a famous argument on the air between Don Cherry and Brian Williams. Brian Williams kept saying it was a black mark for Canadian hockey, and Don Cherry, being Don Cherry, said these boys are sticking up for each other and it's a good thing. And so coming back, there was a lot of mixed emotions. I actually got lucky because I went back to Seattle in the United States, and I didn't have to deal with it. But I remember guys in Swift Current and guys in Hamilton saying it's brutal. Like, it's like coming back from Vietnam. Like, the country's mixed. And so they had to answer tough questions. And, a lot of guys are 17, 18, 19 years old, and they don't know how to do interviews. And they'll sometimes have reporters that'll take advantage of them. And so they said it was a little bit challenging. And I think it took everybody, including the country, some time to sort of appreciate that moment a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to say, the next year we went back in '88, we were under some pretty firm orders. There is no fighting at all, because we were on some serious probation. They actually said, Russia, Canada, you guys are suspended for 2 years. And then somebody in the IHF said, hey, wait, the tournament's in Moscow next year. And then they came back, okay, you're suspended for 11 and a half months. Like, okay. Yeah.
How was that game against Russia the next year?
Oh, intense. We won 3-2. This was in Moscow. And they had McGillney and Bure and Fedorov. And We won 3-2, but I think they outshot us 2-1. Jimmy Waite was our goalie, and he saved the game. But we got one more goal than them. And then because the Canada-Russia game had always been like the grand finale, and our placing the year before was last, actually played each other pretty early. So we only had like Poland and West Germany left, and we knew we were going to win by double digits. So that was like, it was anticlimactic, but we knew we won the gold medal when we beat the Russians.
Right. That's cool. Wow. Can't believe you're part of that history. That's wild. Which team would you say is tighter, if you could, if there is such a thing, between those two groups?
I think just the brawl team. I mean, we actually haven't really had, Hockey Canada's never put a reunion together for that team. We did have a reunion for the 88 team that won the gold medal, but it's almost like Hockey Canada is still a little bit ashamed still of that team. And maybe someday they'll celebrate that team, but there's never been anything official.
Right.
The Hockey Canada and the IHF, that team really didn't exist, but there's that unspoken bond that we all have.
Right. Yeah. Wild. What was the draft like? So, I mean, you go into the draft 5th overall. I mean, that's incredibly high. So you probably interviewed with everybody, or maybe you didn't. Like, what was naive Chris Joseph like at that point? Like, got your suit on, you're sitting there. You're a pretty big player in the hockey world at that point. How was that experience?
Again, I was naive, innocent probably at that time. I did do a bunch of interviews. I remember I interviewed with Chicago, and Daryl Sutter was there. And Daryl Sutter was probably just retired, and he was a player personnel guy, and he was a young guy. And I interviewed, and I just had, like, my pits were sweating crazy, and I think it was leaking through my my suit. And Daryl, I did all my interviews, and they ask you a whole bunch of weird questions, like, what's your family like? Do you have a dog? What do you like to eat? That kind of, like, just random stuff. But Daryl took me aside after, and he just kind of gave me a pat on the shoulder. Just relax, you'll be fine. It'll be a good day tomorrow. So I did a bunch of interviews, and I ended up going where I was rated 5th to Pittsburgh. And it was awesome. So you go down to the table, you meet everybody. And I was so excited that it was such a big deal. I actually stayed in the building, Joe Louis Arena. I stayed for all 12 rounds because I wanted to watch it all. The whole thing took place there, and I stayed for hours. And main reason was I had a teammate that was getting drafted in the supplemental draft after Sean Chambers. He played New Jersey, Tampa, and he was my teammate in Seattle. And so I waited around with him, and then he got drafted in the first round of the supplemental draft back. Right. But yeah, it was a pretty cool time.
So you go to Pittsburgh and to my idol growing up, Mario Lemieux, and you go there out of what looks like, from Hockey DB, you played some games with the, I think like you made the team out of camp, made Pittsburgh out of camp, and that was the year Mario scored 70 goals. Like, what was that like, stepping into that locker room? You must have been 19. Mario Lemieux's there, and you're an NHLer, and paint that picture.
Well, as an 18-year-old, again, like the 16 to 18 years were just like a blur. Like, it just moves so fast. And so I made the team, and I'm like, okay, this is good. I'm going to learn. I'm going to make mistakes. And the Penguins weren't a very good team at the time, but they were starting to get better, and they had to build around Mario. So I ended up playing 22 games, and then I got traded. I got traded to the Oilers in the Paul Coffey trade. Again, whirlwind. You don't even know what's happening. So I only played 22 games there with Mario. I was lucky enough that I went back to Pittsburgh later in my career, and I got to play with him again. But Pittsburgh was pretty awesome. It's definitely still one of my favorite teams I ever played on.
But is there any, like, as far as even making that team, like, do you remember any like seminal moments in that training camp or in the exhibition games? Or you were a 5th overall draft pick, so sometimes like you're written in the lineup maybe before you even show up. How did that feel for you? Do you think that you kind of had your path to that team, or were there things that you had to do to make that team?
I think because they were still growing as a franchise, and I was a high pick. I think they had earmarked me to make the team, and I think I was probably going to make it anyways. And they were hoping that some of the older veteran defensemen would bring me along. And so I think that's kind of what happened. And I was making mistakes, and I was playing, and it was going okay. You know, but then I think they got an offer for Paul Coffey, and it was one of the, you just can't pass it up. And myself and Craig Simpson came to Edmonton in that trade.
All right. It's a big deal.
Yeah. So, you know, as much as they, you know, probably wanted to keep me and nurture me a little, they just got offered Paul Coffey. So, I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken on this show and I mean, lots about what you know, I don't know what the right word is, but it was a massive turning point, which could have been really positive or negative for me, but was the trade to Toronto. And I was 20, or I had just turned 21. So it was my first year pro. So I had 3 years on you, and I felt like I was too young to handle that moment at that time. You know, I went from the AHL to the NHL to you know, to Greensboro, which there was 15 people in the stands, to, you know, Maple Leaf Gardens, trying to figure it out there and all the nuances of that. Like, how did that impact you as a player and as a person, a trade of that magnitude at, you know, 18 years old?
It was tough. And I don't know if it's a whole lot different as for a forward or a defenseman, but I went from a team that was trying to work with me to develop me, and I went to the Stanley Cup champions, and their blue line was solid. Their forwards were solid, and I couldn't get in the lineup. And it was a tough spot. Mentally, it was a tough spot probably for my growth. I probably was stunted in my growth a little bit as a player. And I think it hurt me. It was weird because I went to Edmonton and I kind of had this mindset that they were the Stanley Cup champions. And for the first year or two, I kind of looked at these guys like them and me and not us. And I didn't have that mentality like I'm one of them. And I'm playing with Glenn Anderson and Paul Coffey and Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky. And I was like a fan, you know, and I shouldn't have had that mindset. I should have had the mindset like, I'm going to step in and I'm going to prove to them that I can do it. I probably should have had a little more grooming in the minors, you know, but it's 2020. So that's why, you know, like when you do see players get rushed into the NHL, you worry for them. And I've seen that here, especially in Edmonton. You know, you hope that they're able to develop and nurture growth in some of the young players, because it's so easy to get enamored that this player is going to step in and make an impact. Well, not many do. Usually it takes a little bit of grooming. There's special few for sure do.
Yeah. Looking back on that version of you at 18, and now, you know, with the years and the reflection, what could you have done, or what would have helped Chris Joseph in that moment, like to develop that mindset you're talking about? Because I can relate to that too. Like I was trying to fit in more in the locker room than I was even like really understanding how to do it, like be an NHLer on the ice, you know. Because there's that aspect of it too, right? There's the social aspect of like being in a locker room with those guys. There's also, can I play with these guys? How would you have supported yourself now?
I would probably just pat myself on the back and say, "Come on, kid, you can keep up with these guys. You know, this you can do this." But I think in my mind as an 18-year-old, I tried telling myself that, but I didn't believe it, and I felt like, you know, these guys were the Stanley Cup champions and they were the best team in the world. And, you know, it's going to take you a while to get there, but, you know, you got to believe in yourself. You have to, hockey, when you get to the pro level, as we all know, is so mental. And I think I would have said, you know, come on, show a little swagger, show a little, you know, cockiness, and you can do this, and then work your butt off and get to it.
Right. Yeah, so much easier said than done, right? Like building that, you know, that inner fortitude or whatever that is. I mean, one of the things that I wish I would have done is is think more, because I mean, like I said, I was up in Florida for a little bit that year, 20 games, and I'd been up and down a couple of times, and I got traded at the trade deadline to Toronto. But I had never ever like really thought about being an NHLer, like placing myself there, like what I mean, as far as from a visualization standpoint, like living that, like what do I need to be in that area? You know, like I was definitely more in the moment, right? Like the moment of the here and now, which is there's a benefit to that for sure, because you want to overachieve where you are, right? To get to somewhere else. I mean, that's one of the things. Guys are in such a rush all the time. They want to get somewhere else, right? I don't like where I am. I want to get somewhere else. I'm in the wrong spot. But you got to kick ass where you're at. Like, let's focus on that. So, I mean, I didn't mind my mentality with that, but there's a time and a place to focus on the here and now, and also on where you want to get to. And I think that I had done really there was no processing for me with that. And especially with Toronto, and maybe you can relate to that. Like I kind of had like, and that was my naivety. I thought I was going to retire as a Florida Panther in 15 years and my NHL career to be awesome. And, you know, like I had my whole world was the Florida Panthers. And now it's like the Toronto Maple Leafs, like where I know nobody and I don't know the coach and I don't know any of these guys. And it's like, I had never even entertained a possibility like that. And I think that threw me for a big loop for a while.
Yeah, it's that. You learn quickly, I guess, as a young man in the hockey world that you gotta adapt, change. You know, you might be here, a plugger over here, and you just gotta sort of roll with it. But it's hard to tell a young kid that, because
it's a great word though, adaptability. You know, you mentioned it with Jaxon too, right? Being able to be flexible, like. You know, well, even, you know, who I had on was Corbs. I mean, here you are, 5th overall pick, to end up playing 500 games. I mean, that's an NHL career. I mean, that's something to be super proud of. Yet you maybe you don't feel like you maybe left some things on the table, right? You said that maybe, you know, that trade maybe didn't help you enough. You had to fight through some adversity there. I had Rene Corbet on the other day. He scored 79 goals in junior the one year. He won the best QMJHL player of the year, right? And whatever else he won. And he had to adapt into a third line grinder energy guy to make the career that he did in the NHL. And I mean, that's wild when you actually really think about that, right? I mean, he was the greatest goal scorer in the major junior level, and I mean, he couldn't be a goal scorer in the NHL. You know, like it's a tough racket, right?
It is tough, yeah, and it's opportunity, and you got to take advantage of that spot that you're in. And some days for the defenseman, some days you're number 1, some days you're number 7 or 8. You know, and so you just gotta roll with it and do the best you can.
Yeah. Did you have any secrets as far as doing that? Like, you know, being able to roll with it, being adaptable, allowing yourself to fill different roles?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is realizing that you have to play different roles. Players that come in are like, well, I'm just a shooter, you know, and then, well, we need you to back check, right? And if you don't realize that, your career is short. The minute you do realize that you can do that, then you become versatile. And you can fill in certain roles. And then, you know, maybe you're a 4th line guy and somebody goes down on the top line, but you have proven in the past that you can play top line minutes. So occasionally you get an opportunity. So you jump up and you take advantage of it. But you do have to play that all around game. And, you know, we try to coach the young kids that, and they don't see it, but, you know, you do have to play that 200-foot game. And that's what's going to benefit the kids to get to the next level, because there's only so many. There's only one Alex Ovechkin that just shoots the puck. Everybody else works their butt off in all areas of the rink, right? So yeah, you got to build that whole game. You got to build the versatility to play, you know, 3 minutes a game or 30 minutes a game. You just got to keep honing your skill, work at your game.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about when a coach would tell you something, you wouldn't think he's an idiot. And I read an article that you did. It was actually really well done about the coaching aspect and how when your kid gets cut, you know, it was almost the same type of message to the parent. Like your first knee jerk reaction isn't that it's rigged and it's politics and, you know, like which is what a lot of people do. Is there any message to that? Like as far as having some humility when it comes to whether it is being cut, being coached, you know, some advice, any messages out there to parents or players?
Well, I think that the big thing for me is that, I mean, we all know, you know, who the best players are on the ice in novice and in pro. But when it comes down to the 4th line grinders or the 6th, 7th defenseman, you can flip a coin most most teams. So it could come down to coach's choice. Maybe they just need a right-hand shot and not a left-hand shot. And so you lose the spot because of that. So try not to take it personally. Try to take the coach's words of advice and keep working at your game. And then someday maybe you're not that guy that is interchangeable. Maybe you keep working at your game and you're the guy that the coach has to have. And I think I hate to see players walk away and say, yeah, coach is out of his mind. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because that doesn't really help the kids. That doesn't make them better. That gives them an excuse.
Yeah.
Might even be right, but it still doesn't make them better. Sometimes getting cut is a blessing in disguise, and it's so hard to see at that time. But it does make you dig a little deeper and work a little harder.
Yeah. Well, and you hit the nail on the head, I think, when you're talking about those, the gray area, let's call it, like anyone in the world can go watch Connor McDavid. You've never seen hockey before in your life, and you can tell me that Connor McDavid is a good hockey player, right? I mean, those guys just stand out. When you get down to that gray area, those intangibles we talked about earlier, that's where that makes a massive difference too, right? Having a smile on your face, being a good teammate, how hard do they work? Like all that kind of stuff is like, it's easy to pull for that guy. And a lot of times those guys get spots, and it even comes down to the NHL scenario of longevity, right? I mean, if you're a guy that's easy to be around, people know what you're about, know what you represent, you make people better, you're a good example. Like, why not keep that guy? I know who that is. I know who that player is. There might be somebody who's marginally better on the one-timer, or, maybe a little bit quicker, but I know what I get in the pot as the person. And I think that's something that for young players, it's a really great lesson to learn early. There was one team I was working with this year, Joe, that the one kid got cut from two teams, and was pointing fingers. And like big time, self-admittedly now, right? And then says like he realized that he was a better hockey player than the coaches were getting him credit for, but it was his attitude, it was his mental makeup and how he showed up at the rink. And once he understood that, it was like, wow, now he became a real big asset for this third team that he ended up going to, where it was kind of the end of the road. And I hope he continues on with that. And he realizes that and he goes places, but it's wild how often that holds players back too, right? Without even knowing. I promised you an hour. We're already an hour and 7. So I don't want to cut you.
We probably got to get going, but
yeah, I don't want to cut you short because we didn't even get into Mannheim. Because I know we could talk about that, but maybe that would be less interesting for the listeners and more entertaining for us. So maybe we'll save that for a beer one day. But having played with Gretzky and having played with Mario, you mean, in my mind, the two legends of our era that I never got to see, Bobby Orr. I mean, they're the two greatest players that I had the pleasure of witnessing. You had a chance to play with them. Let's give us your best Wayne story and your best Mario story to close out.
Well, okay. So my first day with the Oilers, I'm just got on the team, and we're playing New Jersey Devils, and I'm on the power play with Mo Mantha and Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Yari Curry.
Love it.
We come in the dressing room anyways after the first period. We're down by a goal. And Glenn Sather walks in, and he starts giving everybody shit. And he goes, and Wayne Gretzky, who do you think you are moving guys around on the face-off? There's only one prima donna on this team, and it's me. And he's pointing at himself, right? And I'm sitting in the corner going, I can't believe he's giving Wayne Gretzky shit. Wayne just took it. And I soon learned after that was Slatz's way to new guys who the real boss is. That wasn't for Wayne. That wasn't for anybody else. They all knew the drill. That was for the 4 new guys that just came in the coffee trade. Well, I got that pretty quick.
Right.
Wayne. But the one thing I found with Wayne is such a hard worker. Like, he worked so hard. I thought he was just going to ride on his skill and talent. He worked hard. Mario was the same way. He worked hard. They were professionals. Yep.
Yeah. Because he kind of got the other rap, like that he just 6'4", 220, and was so amazing skill wise, and he kind of didn't look like he was working hard out there. But did he practice hard?
He did. Yeah, he was probably more naturally gifted than Wayne was. I always tell people this because they always say, "Can you compare the two?" I say, if they played one-on-one against each other, I think Mario would win every time. But if you put 5 Marios out there against 5 Waynes, the Waynes would win every time. He used other people better. and he had a vision that was just off the charts. And, I also say Wayne would still be amazing in today's game. And I really believe that, because he wasn't the biggest, strongest, fastest, even back in the 80s and 90s, but he was the best. And today he wouldn't be the biggest or strongest, fastest, but he had the vision, never put himself in danger. They were both spectacular. They actually belong, if here's the NHL, they belong in a different league. Those two, maybe Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, whatever, but like Connor McDavid, but the rest of us, that's the NHL league. These guys are in whatever, this NHL league, right?
Yeah.
So, pretty cool.
How are they in the locker room as far as those two? Like, do they, with their personalities? I assume Mario was quiet and maybe Wayne wasn't, but I don't know. You tell me.
Wayne was actually kind of quiet. We had Mark Messier in the team at the time, so he was the vocal guy. But they would both had an amazing sense of timing. They would both just put the teams on their own back and just do it themselves if they had to. But their messages were good. They were all about team. They were never selfish. They were true professionals. Yeah.
That's
and when
awesome.
they speak, you listened.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, no kidding. Hey? Well, that's the end of the line out here on Green Shirt Day, and an anniversary. I don't even know if there's a better word for it. I mean, but it is the traditional word of the anniversary of that crash 3 years ago, and you're close to my heart, as I let you know from time to time, and big hugs from Zoom here, and I know we'll have a beer again one day, especially with Brett playing down the road. We'll have a chance to get together, and I really appreciate you sharing, your story, where you're at, talking about Jaxon and that team, and even your career, and sharing that with us today. I really appreciate everything, Joe.
Well, thanks, Potsy. It was a blast. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to having that beer with you.
Awesome. Thank you for listening today to episode 59 with Chris Joseph and myself, and I hope you take some gratitude from the conversation, and not just gratitude because you were listening to the conversation. I didn't mean it like that, but I just mean gratitude into your life. I know that we can get caught up in the day-to-day and the running around, and some of the frustrations that come on us, and we think about what we don't have instead of what we do have. And when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, if you have your loved ones close to you, and you get to go to bed and they're there, and you get to wake up and they're still there, that's a good day. And for some families, like those in the Humbolt Bronco tragedy, that it wasn't a good day. And because it wasn't a good day, things will never be the same. So gratitude goes a long way. I think it helps us through. I think it helps us through as people. And I know it helps us as athletes to deal with adversity and to deal with things that may not be going our way. So, one, please take gratitude with you. Keep it a part of you. Be grateful for what you have and the people that are around you and the loved ones that you have. Your health, all these things that sometimes we take for granted at times. And also a huge thank you to Chris for being willing to share, for wanting to discuss Jaxon. And I'm so thankful that I was in a position that I was able to celebrate Jaxon and his life, and his career as a player and as a teammate, and what he was like as a teenager, and all those things, because it is therapy. Every time you get to talk about him, Jaxon lives on, and that team will live on, I know, in my heart and the hearts of many, because it was such a catastrophic event and a tragedy that really brought a sport community together. And obviously it even transcended the lines of hockey and of Canadian hockey, for that matter, because when something of that magnitude occurs to a group of individuals of such innocence, and with the youth and everything else, the joys and the dreams and the goals that were on that bus, it obviously shakes us all to our core. So it's good to remember, and it's good to be thankful, and it's good to be grateful for our own loved ones and for our own situation. So Chris, once again, you were a star, you're a gentleman, you're an amazing father, and you were it was an honor to play with you, and thanks for joining us today. And everyone else, Play hard. Keep your head up.